What if our understanding of history is merely the surface, and the true narrative of Earth commenced long before the dinosaurs? We perceive ourselves as the inaugural intelligent species, yet Earth's age exceeds 4.5 billion years. Humanity's existence is but a fleeting moment. Dinosaurs held dominion for eons, but what of the billions of years preceding them? What transpired in those profound, forgotten epochs? Could another civilization, intelligent, advanced, and now utterly erased from time, have existed? Not extraterrestrial, not from the future, but ancient and terrestrial. This is not a matter of science fiction. It is a legitimate inquiry that scientists are beginning to pose. The answers may well destabilize the very foundations of our knowledge. The impossible question. Periodically, a question insinuates itself into the mind, one that appears too outlandish to be credible, too immense to be seriously contemplated. Yet once it takes root, it persists, its resonance amplifying the more one attempts to dismiss it. One such question is this: what if we are not the first intelligent civilization on Earth? Not the first to fashion tools, construct cities, or even propel technology into the cosmos? What if, long before the dinosaurs, another species inhabited this planet, intelligent, organized, advanced, and then vanished so completely that no trace has ever been found? Initially, the notion seems preposterous, akin to something from a science fiction novel or a conspiracy theory. But then a realization dawns. Earth is exceedingly old, approximately 4.5 billion years. This figure is nearly incomprehensible to the human mind, too vast to visualize. If Earth's entire history were condensed into a single calendar year, humans would not emerge until 11:58 p.m. on December 31st. The dinosaurs' reign would span from around December 13th to December 26th. This leaves a substantial expanse of time, months even, during which something else could have occurred, and we remain largely ignorant of what that might have been. We are inclined to perceive history as a linear progression. First the dinosaurs, then mammals, then humans, and now here we are with our smartphones and space stations. However, this rendition of history is more akin to the final few pages of a voluminous tome, with the majority of the preceding chapters lost, excised by the passage of time. The fossil record is incomplete. Rocks are pulverized, recycled by tectonic plates, eroded or interred beneath kilometers of sediment. The majority of life that has ever existed has left no fossilized remains. Most of Earth's surface from hundreds of millions of years ago is no longer extant. It has been subsumed into the planet's mantle or obliterated by earthquakes and continental drift. Thus, if an advanced civilization existed hundreds of millions or even billions of years ago, how would we ascertain its existence? Would we anticipate discovering buildings, machinery, metallic implements, or fossilized urban centers? Perhaps not. It is conceivable that such artifacts would not endure. They may have already come and gone, and we have been traversing their ruins unaware. This is the impossible question. Not whether dinosaurs constructed computers or if cavemen were astronauts, but something more profound and disconcerting. Would we even recognize the indicators of a pre-dinosaur civilization had one existed? Could we differentiate between natural geological formations and the weathered remnants of some ancient intelligence? And are we too hasty in dismissing the idea simply because it does not conform to the orderly timeline we have been conditioned to accept? This question is not novel. It has been whispered for decades, primarily in the realms of science fiction and fringe theories. However, recently, even some mainstream scientists have begun to consider it with greater seriousness. In 2018, two esteemed researchers, Gavin Schmidt, a NASA climate scientist, and Adam Frank, an astrophysicist, published a scientific paper on the subject. They termed it the Silurian hypothesis, a nod to a fictional reptilian race from the television series Doctor Who. Their premise was straightforward. If an industrial civilization had existed millions of years ago, would we be able to discern its presence in the geological record today? Their conclusion was both captivating and unsettling. Perhaps not. This is because Earth is remarkably proficient at self-purification. Rain, wind, and the shifting of tectonic plates do not merely erode cities, they obliterate them over tens of millions of years. Even the most conspicuous signs of life, concrete, metal, bones, decompose and vanish. What remains are only indirect clues, chemical signatures in the rocks, anomalous isotope patterns, traces of unusual carbon activity, and even these are easily overlooked, misinterpreted, or ascribed to natural phenomena. Consequently, we are confronted with a peculiar possibility. Not proof, not even a substantial indication, but a question that refuses to dissipate. What if there was once a species, not human, not alien, but of terrestrial origin, that achieved something extraordinary long before our advent? What if they built, discovered, and reached great heights, only to descend into silence? Not due to a singular cataclysm, but because of time. Deep time. Time so immense that it does not merely extinguish civilizations, it inters them so profoundly that we forget they ever existed. One need not subscribe to beliefs in ancient astronauts or lost continents. One need only consider the numbers. Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Complex life has existed for over 500 million years. Humans have been present for less than 1% of that time, and industrial civilization for a mere few hundred years. So one must ask, are we truly the first, or simply the first we can recall? This is the expedition upon which this video will embark. A tranquil, rational exploration of a radical concept. Not to substantiate it, not to promote it, but to demonstrate that perhaps, just perhaps, it is not as impossible as it initially appears. What we think we know, most of what we believe about Earth's past, isn't from direct experience. It's from models, textbooks, fossil records, and educated guesses. Our understanding of history feels solid because it's been repeated so many times. From childhood, we're taught that life evolved in stages. First came simple single-celled organisms, then fish, then amphibians, reptiles, dinosaurs, mammals, and finally us. It's a clean, linear path. The truth, though, is far more complicated and far less certain. Our timeline of Earth is built mostly on what we've found, not necessarily what existed. Fossils are incredibly rare. To even have a chance of fossilizing, an organism has to die in the right place at the right time, under the right conditions. Then, over millions of years, it must survive the constant forces of erosion, pressure, earthquakes, heat, and tectonic destruction. Most creatures that ever lived left behind no fossil at all. They came and went without a trace. That includes not just animals, but entire environments. Whole ecosystems have vanished without a record. Imagine an ancient rainforest teeming with life, filled with species we've never seen. If it existed on a continent that has since sunk beneath the ocean or been subducted into the Earth's crust, it's gone. No clues, no bones, no evidence. It's as if it never happened. And yet we build our timelines from the evidence that survived, the few pieces of the puzzle that just happened to last. That's the first important point. What we think we know is based on what we've been lucky enough to find. There's a name for this problem: the preservation bias. It means the record we see is skewed toward things that fossilize well. Bones, shells, teeth, softer tissues, wooden structures, clothing, buildings. All of those things disintegrate quickly, and over tens of millions of years, even the hard stuff doesn't hold up. So when we say there's no evidence of an advanced civilization before humans, we're making a statement based on absence. We're saying we haven't found it, not that it never existed. That may sound like a small difference, but it's actually massive. The absence of evidence is not the same as evidence of absence, especially when you're dealing with a planet that constantly recycles itself. Now let's zoom out and look at the actual timeline. Earth formed around 4.5 billion years ago. Life began early, probably within the first billion years. For most of Earth's history, life was microscopic. Single-celled organisms, algae, and bacteria ruled the planet for billions of years. Then, around 600 million years ago, something changed. Multicellular life exploded in diversity during what we call the Cambrian explosion. That sounds recent, but it's not. Dinosaurs didn't show up until about 230 million years ago. Humans have only existed for about 300,000 years. And modern civilization, we've had electricity, engines, and satellites for just over a century. That's not even a blink in Earth's timeline. If the planet were a clock, human civilization would be less than a millisecond on the dial. So here's the second important point. There's a lot of room in the timeline for something else to have happened. Hundreds of millions, even billions of years, where intelligent life could have risen and fallen without us knowing. But here's where it gets tricky. Even if a pre-dinosaur civilization had existed, we expect that we'd find their buildings, their tools, their art. But would we? Think about it this way. If humans disappeared tomorrow, how long would our civilization last before it was unrecognizable? Most plastics would break down in a few centuries. Steel buildings would rust and collapse. Glass would shatter. Paper and fabric would rot away in years. Even concrete, which feels permanent, would crumble in a few thousand years. The tallest skyscrapers would be gone. Roads would be buried. Satellites would fall from orbit within 1,000,000 years. Very little would remain. Within 100 million years, probably nothing at all. Geologists estimate that the oldest surface rocks still exposed on Earth are about 4 billion years old, but they're extremely rare. Most of the crust is younger than 200 million years because of plate tectonics, the slow but constant recycling of Earth's surface. This means that even if a civilization existed 300 million years ago, the land they built on might have been dragged under another continent or melted in the mantle. It's gone, erased not by disaster, but by time. So what we think we know is based on a narrow window, a small, scattered, fragile collection of fossils and rock layers. We fill in the gaps with logic and probability. And in most cases, that works. But sometimes when we look too closely at the map we've drawn, we forget how many blank spaces are still there. We confuse the picture with the territory, the model with the truth. And that's where this story begins. In the gaps, in the billions of years we don't fully understand, in the possibility that intelligence has visited Earth before, not from the stars, but from deep within its own forgotten ages. If that's even remotely possible, then we have to rethink not just where we came from, but how much we've truly lost. To even begin imagining a civilization before the dinosaurs, we first need to step into a kind of time that feels alien, not just ancient, but almost beyond human comprehension. This is what geologists call deep time. It's not measured in lifetimes or centuries, or even in the rise and fall of empires. It's measured in millions and billions of years. And when you look at Earth through that lens, everything we know starts to feel very temporary. We're used to thinking of the dinosaurs as unimaginably old, but they only appeared around 230 million years ago in the late Triassic period, and they were gone by about 66 million years ago after the asteroid impact that ended the Cretaceous. That means dinosaurs existed for roughly 165 million years. For comparison, modern humans, Homo sapiens, have existed for less than 1% of that time. Not industrial civilization, just the species itself. Everything we think of as history, from the pyramids to smartphones, has happened in a tiny sliver at the very end. Now consider this. Before the first dinosaur ever took a step, the Earth had already gone through 3 billion years of life. 3 billion. That's over 90% of our planet's history. And in that vast stretch of time, entire worlds came and went. Continents formed and broke apart. Oceans appeared and vanished. Mountain ranges rose and eroded back into plains. And through all of it, life kept evolving. Sometimes slowly, sometimes in bursts, sometimes collapsing entirely during mass extinctions. Let's walk backward. Before the dinosaurs came the Permian period, known for its strange, often mammal-like reptiles, creatures like Dimetrodon with its sail-shaped back. The Permian ended with the largest mass extinction in Earth's history, the Permian Triassic extinction event. Around 252 million years ago, over 90% of marine species and 70% of land species were wiped out. Scientists still debate what caused it. Maybe massive volcanic eruptions, maybe methane releases, maybe both. But whatever happened, it nearly sterilized the planet. Before that was the Carboniferous period, about 360 to 300 million years ago. The world was swampy, lush, and oxygen-rich. Giant insects roamed the skies, dragonflies the size of seagulls. Huge forests covered the land, which would later become the coal beds we mine today. It was a time of dense ecosystems and abundant life. Then came the Devonian, often called the Age of Fishes. Before that, the Silurian and Ordovician periods, where early sea life exploded in diversity and the first plants began to colonize land. And before that, even earlier, was the Cambrian over 500 million years ago, when multicellular life really took off. The Cambrian explosion brought about many of the basic body plans we still see today: segmented creatures, hard shells, primitive eyes. But all of this, even the Cambrian, is recent, compared to what came before. The vast stretch of time before the Cambrian is called the Precambrian, and it covers almost 90% of Earth's entire history. That's nearly 4 billion years of Earth's life before complex animals appeared. Most of what we know about it comes from ancient rocks, rare, microfossils, and chemical clues. It was a world of microbial mats, single-celled life, and slow geologic changes, but even there, strange possibilities remain. One of the earliest events in Earth's biological history is something called the Great Oxygenation Event, about 2.4 billion years ago. Before this, the atmosphere had almost no oxygen. Then photosynthetic bacteria started producing it in massive amounts, completely transforming the planet's chemistry. But here's the thing, oxygen is toxic to many forms of life. So this great event was also a kind of apocalypse, a planet-wide extinction for earlier oxygen-intolerant life. In other words, Earth has a long track record of wiping itself clean, not just physically through erosion and subduction, but biologically by shifting the rules of survival. And during all these eons, the continents never sat still. Thanks to plate tectonics, the Earth's land masses have constantly moved, crashing into each other, breaking apart, drifting across oceans. Hundreds of millions of years ago, there was a supercontinent called Pangaea. Before that, there was Rodinia, and before that, Columbia and Kenorland. Each time the crust of the Earth reshaped itself, and any trace of what lived on those ancient surfaces was pushed deep underground or destroyed entirely. So if you imagine an ancient civilization, not 10,000 years ago, but 300 million years ago, you have to imagine it living on land that might no longer exist. Land that was later buried, burned, or pulled into the mantle. Its cities could have been built on a continent that's now part of the ocean floor. Its people, or whatever they were, might have looked nothing like us, and everything they left behind might have vanished under the slow, grinding wheel of geologic time.